But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. After watching Western nations turn into authoritarian hellscapes during COVID, I've been absolutely disgusted by the idea of the World Health Organization, which mishandled the pandemic from day one, forcing us into a global health treaty that completely removes our autonomy. Luckily, I'm not the only one leading the fight back. After taking an unconventional route into journalism, Avi Yemini isn't one to conform to the narrative pushed by the elite. So, born in Melbourne, Australia, Avi became homeless at the age of just 13. He then moved to Israel and gained citizenship there before becoming a sharpshooter with the Israeli Defence Force. Upon moving back to Australia, he eventually began working as a political activist and commentator, earning the role of chief correspondent in Australia for Rebel News, an online news platform that has gained a massive global following. And last month, he went viral after travelling to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, where he interrogated global leaders, including a special envoy on COVID for the World Health Organization, David Nabarro. Look.
Rebel News, why do you think people don't trust? It's been hard to maintain trust through COVID.
Because COVID's affected poor people everywhere really badly.
So why do so many people blame your organisation, the WHO?
People like to find somebody to blame. I am not giving the WHO official position. Gosh, you're an aggressive interviewer. By the way, the pandemic's not finished. It's still going on.
So those words will scare people because they're thinking we're just getting back to life, and you're telling us from the WHO it's not over.
And Avi Yemini joins me live from Melbourne, Australia now. So, Avi, you had a very interesting time in Davos. Why did you feel it was important to scrutinise these elites who are running organisations like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization?
I guess, firstly, thanks for having me. It wasn't my idea. Ezra, our boss at Rebel News, it was his plan, and I think his gut instinct was spot on. Basically, we got there and you could see that the most powerful people in the world had their own little safe space there in Davos, Switzerland, where they were so shocked when any sort of reporter asked them a real question, just like Nabarro there.
Yeah, and you were also approaching, for example, senior executives at media organisations like the New York Times as well, right? And they didn't want to speak to you.
Well, in fact, I think it was more their handlers that realised that they probably shouldn't speak to me. That they seemed to be shocked that somebody was asking a question, and they tried to engage. But I also spoke to, powerful people, part of the UN. I think your viewers, there's a bunch of different ones. I spoke to the New York Times chief editor who was there as a guest, not really asking the questions that they're supposed to be doing. I think your viewers can take a look at all of those at wefreports.com, not just from me. There was a whole team of 6 of us from Rebel News that came, and it was unbelievable. I dare suggest that next time there may be different protocols in Davos because we did infiltrate their little safe space, like I said.
Well, indeed, and that's what's so fascinating about this, because it is a safe space, isn't it, where these shadowy organisations that contain lots of global elite, they don't expect to be asked a tough question. As you say, the New York Times, they're not there to do journalism and actually work out what's this treaty about, what have these organisations done wrong. They're there as part of the group. It's quite astonishing.
It's really astonishing. And when you go there, you see that they're all wearing name tags, and it's like a class system where it's color-coded. That's what made my job as a journalist really easy. And I'm surprised no other journalists did it, because they color-code, so it tells you straight away by the color how important this person is. Then they have their name and what company or organization they're a part of, or what country they're a minister of, or whatever it is. And so they give you all the information. It's it's essentially the only part in their entire thing that what they practice is what they preach, as in they do want to live in a class system, they do it well, and it really helped us to identify who they are and then pose those really simple questions. People call them tough questions. They're not tough questions. They're what the everyday, ordinary Aussie or Brit would be asking him. Nabarro, I kind of, at the end of it, felt bad for Nabarro. What you don't see on camera at the end of that 8-minute interaction is that he was so shocked. He turned to, once the camera went off, he turned to my cameraman and tried to guilt trip him. But I feel like watching it, it came from a sincere place. He was so thrown off that somebody, what he called, ambushed him, and everybody can watch the full 8 minutes. I wouldn't call that an ambush. I would call that journalism. Like I said, WEFreports.com, the whole thing's up there. And he genuinely was shaking and said to my cameraman, I hope you feel good about your ambush journalism. And I'm just looking at it, and I promised him that I would give him a chance for a proper sit-down interview, because he was saying that was the problem, that I ambushed him on the street in his safe space. I gave him more than a day. I said I would give him a day. I gave him almost a week. In fact, we travelled all the way to Geneva to the World Health Organization's assembly, where they were, trying to get this treaty that you were mentioned signed by all the nations. But I never heard back. So that's why it's so important.
This is the point, Avi, and that's why I think what you did is so important, because of course they won't sit down with Rebel News. But by the way, none of these jokers will come on my show either, or on Mark Stein's show here on GBNews. They're only going to go to media organisations where they know they're going to get an easy ride, because many of these media organisations buy into the globalist agenda. And I think one thing that's really disturbing, Avi, is that these organisations, they are so focused on domestic politics, aren't they? I mean, look at what's going on in the UK, for example. At the moment, we've had a leadership challenge. It's all about personality. You've just had a big election and a regime change in Australia too. So they're so focused on their domestic governments and domestic politics. Very often, these news organisations are completely missing the fact that the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum have increasing control over our lives.
Absolutely. And it's even worse than that. The journalists and the organisations that actually make their way to places like Davos are there, like we said, like the New York Times editor that I confronted. They're there on invite, and they want that little class, the white one, which means that they're really important. They want that. And they want to be invited back next year with the same one. So they're never going to ask a question that could rock the boat. And you see also, just walking around Davos, they're advertising to these people, to these organisations. They're selling their product. And that's what they have. It's a product. They are owned by the corporations, by the governments, by those elites. They're part of that little elite group. And that's why, in the days of the internet, in this time, it's so crucial that citizen journalists and alternative media like Rebel News is so important, I believe.
No, indeed. I think it's so important. I really liked what you did out there, and I did watch the full 8-minute confrontation with David Nabarro from the World Health Organization. I thought you were completely respectful. You were asking very good questions, and as you say, it's well worth a watch. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. That's the Chief Correspondent for Rebel News Australia, Avi Yemini.